Little Horse and Big Conversation. Welcome to Little Horse and Big Conversation, where we give them their say, let the horse guide the way. Here at Little Horse and Big Conversation, we have the choice, so let's give them a voice. Here at Little Horse and Big Conversation, Little Horse and Big Conversation.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Little Horse Big Conversation podcast. You are here once again with me, Amy Mitchell, and my co-host, Ross Cooper. So, what do we have in store for you today? Today, we are going to be looking at the topic of methods and modalities, looking at things to do with training, bodywork, hoof care, anything to do with horses where you may be inclined to follow a specific method or modality. So we'll start off just by giving a little definition of what we actually mean by those things. Mr. Cooper, over to you.
Oh, I'm here with the definitions again, aren't I? I'm like a walking dictionary.
Mr. Science.
So when we looked into this, Mr. Science, that sounds like a Mr. Man. I'm sure there's an app to see if they could turn me into that. Anyway, before we digress too much, 2 minutes in. So a method, looking this up, a method is classed as a procedure for teaching or supporting learning, whereby modality is a particular way that something is done. So I think that adds a little bit of clarity to the definition of what we're working with here. And I think this is a really, really interesting topic of conversation because we know that there are programs, methods, different ways of doing things with horses. And I think it's going to be really interesting to explore the benefits, but also the pitfalls that me and Amy come across in respective areas, but also how this can relate to working with horses as a whole.
Yeah. And I think it's good because I think this is something that we can both have a perspective on, because obviously your day job is working with people and teaching people and teaching horses. And
what's my night job?
Well, I kind of thought as I said that, I thought, yeah. I mean, maybe you don't want to reveal your night job on a podcast.
For a future episode. That's for a future episode.
That's to everybody's imagination.
Oh, I feel violated.
Let me take that back. Your job, I'll remove the word day.
I can't undo it.
Your occupation is teaching people horses. And of course, one of my day jobs is also teaching. Obviously, I have the Orion Trimming School, teaching people to trim hooves. So we're both in a position, I think, to have an opinion on this. So yeah.
So I'm really interested to start because I think this is a question that I know, like, obviously we've spoken about when you were first trained in podiatry.
Yeah.
So when you first trained, how was that structured? Was that sort of consigned to more of a you do A, B, C and then go on to D?
Yes, certainly to start with. Yeah, so I mean, obviously there was a lot of stuff that I learned, but specifically in terms of the trimming, there was a 10-step process to the trim, within certain parameters. And then, later on you learn other things like, how to trim a laminitic and those kinds of things. But yes, there was here is a protocol for applying a balanced trim. Yeah. And actually,
Okay.
I think... No, carry on.
No, go on. I interrupted your flow there. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I have a feeling we may have been about to say the same thing. So you take it away.
Well, I was just about to say, how do you feel that since establishing that, how do you feel your work has changed to where you are now?
Yeah, so I feel like the way I was taught was, here is a good safe trim. This will keep you out of trouble, but learn other things. Um, and that's great because that's always been my mindset. Um, you know, and what I the way that I teach my own students is similar in that I teach them a basic trim that is a good, safe trim. And once they are competent at doing that trim, we then start layering in lots of other techniques and lots of different approaches. Because I think that's really important. I think being open-minded and investigating other ideas and having a lot of different techniques in your toolbox, as it were, I think is really valuable, and knowing how and when to apply them.
I think that's quite cool. That I mean, I know you're of that mindset anyway, but I think that was really healthy that they sort of, I don't know, established that to
Yeah,
start with.
definitely.
Because
Definitely.
I don't think, in a lot of learning situations, I don't think that is something that's really promoted enough. It's
Yeah.
sort of this way and keep your eyes fixed here, as opposed to going, well, this offers you a really great foundation, but also see what you might be able to integrate into your own practice to, either expand your knowledge,
Mm. Yeah.
make it a bit more of your own. So I think
Yeah.
the fact that they promoted that from an early onset was really cool.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean I'm it was one of the reasons I chose that course at the time. Um I'm very strongly of the opinion that you cannot have a single approach to trimming feet. Like you know, if you're trimming all feet the same, the majority of those horses are not getting the trim that they need. It
So
it
can you
needs to
elaborate
be
on that?
well, you need to be looking at so so what concerns me is when someone comes in, picks up a foot, gets all 4 feet trimmed in a very short space of time, and it is not for me what I think is important is that you look at the foot and you look at the horse. You look at how the horse is standing, how the horse is moving, where they've got tension patterns, like what is going on for that horse. This hoof that becomes the interaction between the horse, the horse's body and the ground is really important. But if you don't take the time to look at what's happening with it and okay, what's good about this foot? What's weak about this foot? What structures am I trying to improve over time? What do I want to achieve today for this trim? What do I want to try and achieve in 3, 6 months' time? And trim that foot according to what you're seeing and what you're trying to achieve, then I think you're doing a great disservice to the horse. And I don't think having a single methodology that you apply to all hooves will ever allow you to do that, in my opinion. So I feel that where, and this might be a slightly controversial statement, but I feel like, and pretty much with anything, I'm sure there are examples in life where it's not true, but for a lot of things, there is not a single right answer. And I feel if somebody is telling you that there is a single right answer, they are probably more interested in taking your money from you than in getting the right outcome. I think you need to start with, you need a process because you're learning how to put this thing together. It's all new to you. You need a process to start with. And I think that's really important. Having a number of steps to work through is a great way to learn. Having a framework is a great way to learn. But you should move beyond that, which is where then, you know, gaining different experience and asking the questions rather than just doing something because, like, it's the next step in the process, but is it the right thing to be doing and how should I be doing it? Do I do it the same way? or do I adjust it a bit? That I think is where real skill is. I think real skill is being able to see what's needed and question. And sometimes you don't have the answers. Sometimes I'll try something and I think, okay, that didn't get the result that I thought it was going to. So I'm either going to have to try something different, or I'm going to have to do some research, or I'm going to contact someone that I know and say, have you dealt with this and how did you do it and what result did you get?
Hmm.
I think that
I'm
that
just
level of curiosity is really important. Whereas following an A plus B plus C equals D might be okay for some horses, but horses aren't all the same.
I'm actually just sitting with something that you just said like 30 seconds ago about real skill being to see.
Mm.
And that's just got me thinking because with that comment, I just felt my body relax a little bit. That just sitting with that comment, I actually felt my insides relax a little bit. And that I'm just trying to form words with this because I think, from time to time we do a lot and have a lot of reflection on what we do and how we work. And because I don't follow a set method
Mm.
in my process and of how I work, I sometimes feel that I should, and it's a detriment that I don't. I don't have a program that I put out there. I don't have a one, two, three step. I've got a framework,
Yes.
but I will very much show up into a situation and through, there will always be a combination, like you say, of showing up to a situation and gauging that situation on a combination of experience and experiment.
Yeah. Yeah.
The more experience, the less experiment. But actually, because there are so many little nuances between everything, there's always room for a little bit of experimentation. Will this work? How does this suit that horse?
Mm. Yeah.
And that's where I tend to start when I show up to any lesson, whether it's a progressive, whether it's progressive lessons that I've been working with someone on something specific for X amount of time, or whether it is a horse that I've met for the first time, it's seeing where they're at and going, this is the starting point. So actually, you saying that there has actually really resonated with me in a way where I feel okay about that.
Yeah, no, I think it's important. I know
God, was not expecting to go
we've
deep with that.
I think, but this is something that I know when you've been in the past wanting to redesign your website and things, and we've been talking about stuff, and you've been saying, I don't know how to describe what I do. I think this is part of it, and it's what makes it difficult to describe. Like, well, people will contact and say, well, what method do you use? But it's difficult. But I like the word framework. I think that's the thing. Having a framework is great. Having a prescriptive step-by-step process when you're working with sentient beings, I feel has some quite big limitations.
Yeah. I mean, I think, there are certainly a lot of benefits to having a program to follow. It's really, I think for people especially, it makes it accessible. It makes it, you know, I don't want to see a checklist, but it offers a step-by-step process, which
Yeah,
I think is, is not a bad thing at all. And it's also a really great way to measure progress. And
yeah,
and
totally.
importantly, it's systematic. all learning should be consistent, especially for our horses. So if you have a systematic approach to a shaping program where you're trying to train different behaviors, you're building on quite a strong, healthy foundation by having that consistency in there for for ourselves, but also for our horses. But I do think that you can adapt that into a framework with how you approach. It doesn't have to be rigid, and I think that's for me. In my experience, I feel that there are quite a few pitfalls that can come with certain ways of working across the board, not just
Mm,
applied to behavior and training, where in the way that it's delivered, it doesn't allow room for adaptation for that individual horse. Yeah, there are programs out there where if the horse doesn't conform, the horse very often gets a poor deal.
mm, yeah,
And
yeah,
it can quite often highlight the same issues. Whether we're looking at that from a trimming perspective, whether we're looking at it from a training perspective, or a bodywork perspective. The same patterns can show up. So I think it's
yeah,
quite interesting that there's definitely a place, but I think you hit the nail on the head when you said we're working with sentient beings. You know, there's there's so many different pairings out there of different people with different skill sets, of
mm,
different internal workings, different environments, different situations, different setups, different backgrounds. All of these need to factor in. And I personally don't feel that you can put all of those factors into a box and make
no,
it fit. There has
no,
to be room for expansion.
yeah. And I think in your role, I think it's kind of double because for me, when I'm making decisions about trimming the foot, I'm making those decisions based on the horse. Whereas you're having to integrate the person and the horse. Like you're working with the partnership. I know I do that to a degree, but it's your role is very much focused on that partnership, which adds a whole new kind of dynamic into it, I think. Like what is going to work for one person, one partnership is not necessarily going to be the right thing for another pairing, and
Mm.
it's I think it adds a whole new layer of complexity.
Yes, and I think when I first started working with horses professionally, I still never really followed or invested in a program.
Mm,
There are sure, and it goes back to what we were saying about frameworks. There are things that will help out the horse in that situation. You might have little staples which will really help the majority of horses. And that is okay, that's healthy.
yeah,
But it's not about what we do when it works, it's about what we do when it doesn't.
yes,
How do we meet that horse or that person where they're at within our remit? So if we set
yeah,
ourselves up for effectively self-imposed limitations, then we become quite restricted in how we move forward and by extension progress. And I think I look at things very differently now, and I think we all do, and I think we all should do moving forward because we learn more about ourselves, we learn more about our horses, we learn more about behavior, about bodies, about hooves, about all of these things that interlink and factor in to the one situation we have in front of us. You see things with a lot more depth. I see things now in bodies that I wouldn't have recognized 5 years ago.
mm,
But now I look at a horse's body and go, okay, that exercise is not suitable. That exercise may be suitable. Let's try this. Let's build up. where is their mind at in conjunction to their body? Because I think, again, this is certainly not a bad thing, because we've had this conversation about diversifying.
Yeah.
I think I think it's absolutely great to just focus on behavior or just focus on body work as your main subject of interest or area. But I do think that there needs to be expansion into being able to read horses from that slightly different perspective of going, okay, is that horse actually sound? What's actually going on with the horse there? Is that a, is that a behavior that is signifying that the horse is unhappy? Do you know what I mean? So I think even though we've got our respective remit and areas, that doesn't mean to say that we can't do a little bit in being able to read the entire situation a little better without going down different lanes.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah, being able to. So uh, I my trimming course teaches students about all sorts of stuff, about whole horse health. But I always make a point of saying to them, you know, you will learn about nutrition, but you will not be a nutritionist. You will learn about tack fit, but you will not be a saddler. You will learn, you will learn about the body, but you will not be a body worker. But you will have enough of awareness of all of these things to be able to identify when it's causing an issue. And then I always think that a key part of the equine podiatrist role is to act as a bit of a linchpin, to be able to look and say, okay, I can see there's something not quite right here. It's not in my wheelhouse. It's not my area of expertise, but I think you need to bring this person in to address this in order that we can help sort this problem that we've got going on with the feet. And
That's really healthy.
I think that's really, yeah, I think it's really useful to have that wider knowledge. So I think that kind of,
Yes.
and I like the fact that you've gone off and learnt about different types of body work and different sorts of training and so on, because I think having that big kind of breadth of knowledge to be able to notice different things and to be able to say, okay, right, as you say, right, well, we're not going to do this because it's not going to be right for that particular horse. I think is really, really powerful. Um, yeah, it's interesting because from a riding perspective, I very much consider myself to be a novice. I mean, I've probably over the last 10 years, I've barely ridden at all, really. And I can see how having a program to work to, if I was to think, right, okay, I'm gonna get back into riding properly, and I'm gonna start, and I'm gonna like throw a lot of energy and focus into it. I can see the attraction to having a program to work to, because otherwise, I think probably like a lot of people, you get your horse, you go into the arena, and you're just like, I don't know what to do. So it's definitely useful. And I think as a horse owner, having a program is great. If you've got someone supporting you through it who has got that extra knowledge and can say, okay, but we're not going to do this bit, or okay, but we need to spend longer on this bit, or actually, I think we need to go off on a bit of a tangent here. And I think, yeah, I think that's the thing. There is a place for these things where it's really useful and it can give people confidence. but you can't hang your hat on it and say that this is going to be the right thing in every situation. So, I mean, for example, there are, people out there with trimming who say heels should be left high. There are people that say that you should always trim the heels right down. Like, it's dealing in absolutes.
Yeah, which is never healthy.
And
I'm
that's
saying
not,
healthy quite a lot.
it's not reality. There are no absolutes in these things. And I'm not saying like never go in, like going in with a complete scattergun approach and never like have a framework, but be adaptable.
Yes.
Example, I have a protocol that I have in my mind. If I'm going to take shoes off a horse, I have a bit of a protocol that I will have in mind. With looking at various aspects of that horse, its environment, its feet. But I will adapt that protocol according to the state of the horse's feet, where the owner's at, the environment that they're in, what facilities they've got available to them, what they can financially invest. Like, there are so many variables, but I have a framework.
Hmm.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's having something that you can work within and around without being too wedded to I must do this because anything else is wrong.
Yes, and I think that's the commercial side of modalities and some
Yeah.
programs is that this is what you have to follow at any expense.
Yeah.
And I think, there is a lot of commercial appeal. Like you were saying, it's beneficial to have a program to follow.
Yeah, it's reassuring. Like
Yes,
it's a lot less stressful.
yes. And, you know, I can offer a program, but it may be something that will vary off
Yeah.
because that may be needed. So it's like having homework for the next couple of sessions, see how you get on with that, and
Hmm.
then let's fix and swap. So you've got an outline of where you're heading,
Yeah.
but it's not rigid in the way that it needs to be applied. I had a really
Yeah.
interesting session with a really good client yesterday, and there was we was doing a little bit of work with one of the syringes, just doing a little bit of yeah, just a little bit of work with the syringe, just kind of helping her gain some confidence with that. And she's pretty good, pretty good. All you have to do is pop the syringe out, and she generally kind of, puts her mouth around it herself. So for worming or anything like that, it's not going to be an issue in the future. And there was a misinterpretation of what I had said in the sense of not taking it to her. And there was only a
Hmm.
small change of intention with body position, which changed the horse's response. And then when I swapped places to effectively demo, I presented it in a different way and she came to it, which was interpreted as I was taking it to her.
Mm.
So I had changed my position, which threw off how it was being perceived. Does that make sense?
Yeah. What, by the horse?
So how it was being perceived by the person, but also by the
Okay.
horse. So the
Okay.
horse's
Yeah.
behavioral response changed,
Yeah.
but my client was just a little bit, oh, okay, you're now standing there and doing this, whereas before you suggested doing this.
Yeah. Okay.
But it was literally the subtlest of change that
Yeah.
needed the adaptation because she was getting a bit worried about it within that situation.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's that nuance.
Yes, because I'd said previously, you know, stand at the side, we'll kind of work on a little bit of contact work around the head, and then kind of present the syringe which she was getting comfortable with, but it was that last step that she was struggling with. So
Mm.
I said, still present it, but just in a different position. But that was the change. So
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
outlined that framework of how to apply, but then changed it slightly, which threw her
Yes.
a little bit, understandably,
Yeah.
but then it all worked out fine. So it's sort of meeting that situation where they where it was needed, really.
And what do you think if you hadn't have made that change? So say the way that it was being done originally
Hmm.
was like, right, this is the way it has to be done. There's no adaptations to this. This is the way it has to be done.
Yeah.
What do you think the outcome would have been from that?
So the outcome within that session, I feel that the horse would have got more bracy
Mm.
and the owner would have got internally frustrated and maybe a
Yeah.
little bit upset.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
wouldn't be any frustration towards the horse. It would be feeling a feeling of incompetence with that,
Yeah. Yeah.
which I never want anyone to feel. Everyone should always feel empowered with how they work.
Yeah.
So if I'd have said, stick with that, stick with that, stick with that, there would have
Yeah.
been a bad taste for the horse and there'd have been a bad taste for the person,
Yeah.
emotionally and physically, because by making the changes, the horse walked forward, popped the syringe in the mouth, and then boom, quite
Yeah.
happy.
Yeah.
And then we were able to blend it later on that session to a slight change in position, which she
Yeah.
was more ready for. So, and
Yeah.
that
That's a good example.
I'm talking about that working with something very simple like a syringe, but the amount of horses that have issues with worming and syringes is,
Mm.
it can very easily be worked with and actually introduced correctly in the right way. And she's pretty golden. It's just a change in position which she's a bit unsure about because she's
Mm.
had an abusive history. So if I hadn't have made that change, then like I said, the out it wouldn't have been as good an outcome than what we had. But things like that can be applied to a multitude of different situations, regardless whether you're working on the ground or in the saddle. A lot of the time, if you are in the saddle and starts to go slightly sideways, instead of going, right, I must do this, a lot of the time we do too much in the saddle.
Mm. Mm.
When actually, if we apply a little bit less in the right way and maybe make that intuitive, okay, I've got these few things to play with. Did that work? No. Did that work? Oh, okay, a little bit closer. Can I ask again? Yes, great. So, but again, this is the thing with programs, is that I don't think it taps into your intuition. I don't think
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
brings about that developing feel which we need as people, which we all have access to different degrees.
Yeah.
But I think it keeps you in more of a cerebral state as opposed to a feeling state.
I think that's a really important point, actually. Yeah, I think that's a really important point.
And everything we do with horses is better when it's done off feel.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, that's very true.
But we just need to reach that point. And if we go through a couple of programs to get there and we cherry pick, that equally is okay, as long as we're not inconsistent with how we work with our horses.
Yeah. Yeah, I think yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Like this, there is comfort to be had in the structure,
Hmm. Yes.
but do you get the best results always? Or is the structure too like, you maybe would see people go through a training program to hit certain goals. And mechanically, those goals are achieved. But when you look at the horse yes, they might mechanically be doing the thing, but do they look like they feel happy, confident, and safe doing it?
Rarely.
And I think this is where there is a big risk in. And also, like, if you've got someone who's teaching a program and they're an absolute expert in it, like they're really skilled, they know exactly what they're looking for, they've got all the nuance, they've got all the timing down, they're really good at it. So they probably are consistently getting really good results with it because they are really, really good. But then you get someone who's less knowledgeable and who's learning. It's easy, particularly if you're learning stuff remotely. Um, it's really easy to misinterpret what it is that you're supposed to be doing and what it is. Like you may feel that you're mechanically doing the thing, but there's a missing link somewhere. Like you're unable to read the signals or see, oh, actually, I'm doing this, and the horse is doing the thing. But actually, while it's doing the thing, there's some bracing going on in this part of the body.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
you're not achieving the thing that the real expert person can achieve.
Yes, you can have a level of comparison there too.
Yeah.
And I think you've definitely pricked my thinking in the sense that that's brought about one or two thoughts. So I think you've obviously got a comparative element to it alongside certain programs where the objective is to get said horse to do this. So you're either, depending how they're responding, you go, okay, ask horse, increase pressure. So you've got literally pressure
Mm,
release and
mm,
you've got no nuance within that.
mm,
Likewise, you may have positive reinforcement where horse presents mechanical behavior, horse
mm,
gets reinforcer.
mm.
But there's no actual reading of the conversation that's going off. And, that stuff is more accessible now than what it ever has been before, which I think is great. But
Yeah.
I think successful programs are unlikely to adopt information from the outside because it's their program.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's where, and I completely understand because it's human nature for want to have a community that you feel like you belong to. It's that connection piece again.
Yeah.
And I think this is potentially both a benefit and a pitfall is that with programs, you have a sense of belonging that, you go to specific events run by organizations and, you talk hooves, you talk bodies, you talk training, and, you do have that sense of,
Yeah, you've got like a common language.
yeah, which I think is really lovely and really healthy. However, the dark side to that is that it can be conformist and cult-like. If you aren't working within that remit or you maybe question something with the best intentions,
Mm.
you get hung, drawn, quartered, or burnt at the stake.
Yes. Well, clearly that's not a healthy space to be in.
No, no, I'd rather not be burning or be hung, drawn, and quartered.
That went out in the medieval times, hopefully.
Sorry, I don't know if I was living a past life there. Um,
I hope not.
but, but yeah, I think, not wanting to pull at a deeper thread, but what kind of people do do these attract in terms whether you are following a cherry pick approach, whether you've got a framework, whether you are invested in a program, does that say something about us as people, what we are unconsciously seeking? I don't know the answer to this because I've literally just thrown that out there on a whim because it came to me. And I think it will do to some extent because, again, that sense of belonging,
Yeah, I mean, we all want to be on the right side of history, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you become part of a group and, part of something and you think, oh, this is the answer. Like this is definitely the right way of doing things. And here's a group of people who are supporting me in that. That's going to feel good, you know. Um, no one wants to go around thinking, "Oh, I'm doing a shit job or I'm doing things badly here." We all want to think that we're doing the right thing and for the right reasons.
Yeah, for sure.
So that kind of support of, you know, we can give you we can give you the answers. This doesn't need to be stressful. I can give you the answers. I think that, and particularly something where I feel like when it's things that involve people and horses or dogs or we are really emotionally involved with hopefully with the well-being of our animals. And it can be difficult when there are so many like options and everyone's got an opinion and whatever you say someone else will come back and say, well, that's stupid and you're a horse abuser. And do you know what I mean? Like this, if you've got the comfort of a group of people that say actually who confidently come out and say actually this is right, stick with this and you won't go wrong, we'll support you, and you get that sense of community and that sense of support and that sense of clarity. I can imagine that feels good.
How could it not?
How could it not? How could it not? But I feel you can provide all of those things, but also embrace curiosity and open-mindedness and creating a wider community. Like you don't have to be an isolated community. I think we can all learn something from each other.
Yes, which is how it should be. We
And you
can
don't
each
have to
have
agree all the time.
no.
You get five trimmers in a room, you're all going to come up with different ways of doing things. But actually, I like that. I think it's great. Like if there was a single right answer, we'd all be doing it and we'd all be getting perfect results and laminitis would no longer exist and no horses would have underrun heels and hooves would be like perfection. But there isn't a single answer. So you need people who are going off and going, but what about if we did this? Like why aren't we trying this? Like that's how we have innovation and how we move forward and we find new things. That for me, I think that's great, and I love getting groups of people together who've got different ideas and do things differently and going, oh, how would you do this? Okay, well, that's not how I. This is well, why would you do that way? And I find that really energizing. In fact, you can probably tell because I've got really animated while we're talking. My hands have started
Yeah.
going. So for me, that wider, I know somehow we've managed to move from methods and modalities to community and all that, but I think it's connected in the conversation.
Yeah, it is. And everything that you're saying there, I think is what's needed. We very much, and I do think online presence has a lot to do with this in the sense that we see something and then we feel that it needs an answer, but we often give quite a defensive answer as opposed to, like you say, looking at it with curiosity.
Mm,
Well, how does that work for you? How does that work for the horses that you've worked with?
mm,
As long as it's not abusive or you're not attempting to train a lame horse, which you can see has got obvious physical issues,
yeah,
then, if we're not going down that route, then let's explore what you've been doing as to the wise hows and how's that worked out for you and the horse.
yeah,
And I think there is that disconnection out there where there are. I think it's getting better. There are so few people that are open to collaborating with other
mm,
professionals, regardless whether that is someone within their same remit or whether that is professionals working in different areas. And I think a
And I
lot of it
think
has
that's
got,
sad.
it is, and I think you've got to, I think you find your people at the right time. People that you work with, clients find you at the right time. You're part of their journey at the right time. You align with certain professionals and people at the right time. So you've got to be singing from a similar hymn sheet. But I also think it's good to not be singing from a hymn sheet as long
Mm,
as you've got an open mind and, like you say, that curiosity. But it is sad that
yeah.
collaboration is so few and far between.
But do you think, and I was just thinking as you were speaking then, do you think that some of the reason that there isn't so much collaboration is that everybody's so busy? Like, and it takes somebody to reach out and say, "Hey, shall we do something? Like, let's have a meet up, or do you know what I mean? Like, everybody, I think a lot of people that you talk to say, "Oh, yeah, I'd love that. I'd love to collaborate more with other people. I'd love to learn from other people." But it doesn't happen because we're all too busy running around in a bloody mad hamster wheel. I like, okay, specifically, we've had some fantastic guests on the podcast, but that is because we've made that happen by reaching out to people. Like, there has to be an someone has to make the effort to take the step to say, okay, I'm gonna do this thing to get people engaged, to get people involved.
But equally, they've made the effort by making space in their diaries to chat and talk and connect
Oh,
and communicate.
100%. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So,
It goes both ways, but someone needs to be the initiator.
yes. And when you ask me that question about do I think people are too busy? No. That's literally no for me because I think and yes, lives are busy. We can so easily not pick up the phone to our best friend for 3 or 4 months because we are busy. So I do think that is a massive factor. But there are people out there who are busy who make that effort and make that initial first step. So I think that may be down to how much they actually want it to happen, how much they actually mean it. Is there an
Mm,
authentic presentation behind it? So I think a lot of the time it's maybe just superficial niceties. And
yeah.
I'm not cynical at all. And I hope that doesn't come across too cynical. But I think a lot of the time it is pleasantries because the
Yeah, like
people that do
platitudes.
collaborate, yes, which I think, it's still nice to receive a compliment. If you don't mean it, don't say it. I'm a big fan of that. But I think there are enough people out there collaborating and exchanging ideas and work. And if they want to make it happen, it's a message on WhatsApp, it's a quick email. It takes
Yeah,
30
I
seconds.
guess so. I guess
And
so.
yes, you might have, and this is just sort of how my mind operates with this, is that, you know, life is busy. Of course, we all have stuff going off. If you say you want to collaborate in January and then you end up messaging in October, that's
Mm,
still equally fine. It doesn't need to be I'll message you tomorrow because life
mm.
is life. And if it's meant to happen, it will happen, but with that investment from both sides. So I think regardless whether it's 3 days or 3 months, you can still make that initial, hey, really like your work. Do you fancy doing a group clinic together or maybe having a bit of a chat about something at some point?
Mm,
Touch base when you can.
yeah, yeah.
It's easier now than ever. We're not sending messages by pigeon. Even then, we
Very
might get a
true.
quicker
Yeah,
response,
no,
but
that's true. That's true. Yeah,
but that is
yeah.
my perspective on effort with people anyway. So I think that maybe mirrors a little bit of how I operate in relationships. I don't I don't have any judgment or negative feelings towards mates that might not have been in touch for months because we'll kind of touch base when we're both free, but we'll always sort of check in, even if it's just with
Mm,
a "How you doing? Sorry, been really busy."
yeah.
It's that mutual effort and that mutual want, and I think
Yeah,
it's the
yeah.
want
You I
prompting us.
guess that's true, isn't it? You can make time and effort for the things that are important to you.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, out there, if you want it to happen, just make the time
Yeah.
and just make the click.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
that's how professionally we grow as a community. And regardless whether we belong to a program, a method, or we prescribe to this or that, or, we're a little bit of a loose cannon, we can quite easily find a community of people that you can share these kinds of conversations with in an objective way where you're still working for the betterment of the horse because ultimately the horse is the framework
Yeah.
and we're guided by them.
I feel like that could be Ross Cooper's wise words to end the podcast. The horse is the framework and we are guided by them. There you
I
go.
might have to
Write
put that
that
on
down.
I am. I'm actually going to write it down and put on a little picture graph later and then post it. And
When
I know
when
it's
you write a book, you can put like Ross quotes in bits of your book.
when I'm writing a book,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll share some thoughts on you with that when this is over because I'm not ready to announce anything publicly yet.
Oh.
Ooh, exclusive. I find it really cheesy that sometimes I'll quote myself and post it online because I don't want to forget.
Ah, brilliant.
Anyway, on that note,
Yes.
I think this has again been another really cool conversation to have.
Yes, it has. It's once again, it's meandered across a few different different areas of life.
It
Um,
has.
but yeah, no, it's been interesting. Thank you. I've enjoyed the conversation.
Very
So
welcome.
yes,
Thank you for being
hope
part of it.
oh, look at us being all collegiate and nice to each other.
I don't even know what collegiate means. Right, on that note, I'm off to Google.
So yes, Ross is off to Google the long word. But thank you once again for listening. I hope you've made it this far, and we would be so grateful if you would give the podcast a like, maybe a little review and a share. That would be awesome. But yeah, until next time, thank you very much for tuning in.
Take care, guys.